Last summer, my wife, Emily, went away for a week to help her mother around the house. She does this from time to time. They have a close relationship, and Emily often feels that her mother could use an extra pair of hands, especially after her father died. So, I found myself home alone. It was strange at first. The silence in the house was almost deafening. I had some free time, so I decided to call a few friends. As the weather was nice, we decided it was the perfect opportunity to get together. We ended up having a fantastic day laughing, enjoying the sunshine, grilling food, and eventually hitting the bar for a drink. The hours flew by, and after a few rounds, I was drunk, hungry, and ready to head home. By the time I got back, it was past midnight, and my stomach was rumbling. I was craving something warm and comforting, so I decided to make pasta. I poured them into a pot, added the spices, and then realized I was out of salt. This was a shame, considering I had already started cooking. I thought for a second, should I knock on the neighbor's door so late? Maybe someone was still awake? I hesitated, pondering whether or not it was worth it. After all, it was well past midnight. But hunger overcame caution, and I switched off the cooker and went out into the corridor, hesitating for a moment before knocking on the door next to mine. A few minutes passed, and just as I was about to give up, there was a rustle behind the door, followed by some muffled swearing. The lock clicked, and the door swung open, revealing my roommate, Jessica. She was clearly drunk, barefoot, and wearing a loose nightgown that left little to the imagination. She had only recently moved in, and we hadn't had a chance to talk much beyond a polite greeting in passing. I asked if she had any salt I could borrow, and she looked at me with a playful glint in her eyes. "Neighbor, why so late?" she teased, biting her lip. Her voice was slightly slurred, but there was an undeniable charm in the way she spoke. She gestured for me to come in and added, "Have a seat. I'll check it out." I followed her into the sparsely furnished living room, just a bed and a few unopened boxes, with clothes lying on one of them. There was a faint smell of unpacked items and wine in the air. I took a seat on the bed, noticing a half-empty bottle of wine and a glass on the small table beside it. There was something in the room, in the atmosphere. A strange tension hung in the air, something almost electric. Jessica returned, her nightgown barely tied, and a glass of wine in her hand instead of the salt I'd asked for. She sat down next to me, her mischievous smile never leaving her face. "No salt, I'm afraid," she said, a hint of mocking regret in her voice. "But since you're here, how about a drink before we go?" She poured us both a glass. Her movements were slow and deliberate, and we raised them together, an unspoken understanding between us. There was a silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was filled with a kind of anticipation, a sense that something was about to happen. She leaned closer, her warmth and the scent of wine intoxicating. Her voice lowered to a whisper. "You're alone tonight, aren't you?" There was desire and curiosity in her eyes, something raw and honest that caught me off guard. I nodded, and she moved even closer, pressing her body against mine. I felt her breath on my neck, and the air changed, heavy with something we both felt but didn't yet realize. It was as if the room itself was pressing us against each other, the tension becoming almost unbearable. Before I knew it, I was pulling her closer, my hands finding the soft fabric of her nightgown. She seemed to have been waiting for this, her eyes closed as she nestled against me. The wine glass slipped out of her hand, landing softly on the carpet without shattering. We fell back onto the bed, and the rest happened on its own, as if it had been leading up to this all along. There were no thoughts, no hesitations, just the two of us, lost in a moment that seemed both inevitable and timeless. The world outside the window ceased to exist, and all that mattered was the warmth of her body against mine, the way her hands moved through my hair, and the feeling that, at least for this night, we were exactly where we wanted to be.